tasked with assembling an elite team to travel through time. All your worlds are about to change.
Hey guys, Nick here, and welcome back to another Legend of Tomorrow episode review. My thoughts on the Season 1 finale of Legend of Tomorrow. And first of all, I gotta seriously give serious props to the team at Legend of Tomorrow. This was an awesome season finale. There's some minor problems I had with it, but overall, I felt like, you know what, didn't necessarily live up to... Okay, it definitely lived up to my expectations, because I wanted it to be good. At the same time, I kept my expectations kind of low, because I know, like, it can either go really good, or, like, Arrow Season 3 status, so... I don't know, I try to keep my, like, you know, my emotions in check and my anticipation level in check, and I was really satisfied with this finale, and I still honestly think this show should have been cut by, like, 3 or 4 episodes. There's so many filler episodes that we really didn't need at all, but this episode was so well paced, so well put together. It wrapped up the story, it didn't feel rushed. It was everything I could want in a season finale, and then some. And of course, they tease us at the end there. So if you guys have not watched the season finale, you know, spoiler warning, whatever. But I'm assuming you guys have watched it. This again, such a great episode. One of the bigger things in this episode that I just want to get out of the way. Next season, Justice Society of America, Rex Tyler crashing in on the Wave Rider. Justice Society of America coming to the CW. I'm so beyond excited. And you know, with the Justice Society of America, hopefully it's from the past, not from like the future or anything. I mean, with the Wave Rider coming in, you know, it's probably from the future. But for those of you who don't know, the Justice Society of America in the comics was the first superhero team from DC or Marvel or any of them. And it was pretty much the precursor to the Justice League. And in the Justice Society, you had Hawkman, Dr. Fate, the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott. You had the original Flash, Jay Garrick. You had all these different heroes from the 1930s and 40s coming together to form this superhero team, and it was the first of its kind at the time. And there's been multiple iterations of the team over the years, and it's gone through a bunch of different lineups, including Stargirl, and there's a whole Justice Society episode of Smallville that was on way back when Smallville was on, like 4 or 5 years ago, or even 6 years ago at this point. But that tease, obviously leaving in the show on the cliffhanger with, surprisingly enough, the Hawks, you know, Hawkman and Hawkgirl leaving. And I feel like the biggest weakness in the show has been the Hawks. Particularly Kendra, because the writers, they weaken Kendra as a character so much to the point where I didn't even care what happened to her. And my biggest problem with this episode was Kendra. She was already kidnapped by Vandal Savage, and she gets knocked down, and she's like, ugh, and then she gets kidnapped again. These writers do not know how to handle Kendra as a character, besides being a love interest to someone. But that being said, that her final fight with Vandal Savage, with her and Carter teaming up against Vandal Savage, that was an awesome fight. I want more of that from Kendra. I'm so tired of the whiny, love interest driven kind of character that we've gotten from her as a character, and I'm so tired of these writers in these shows, because Legends of Tomorrow has most of the writers from Arrow, not necessarily the Flash or even Supergirl, but that's where I think a lot of the weaknesses in these shows come from, is because they don't know what to do with these characters. That's why, like, I think as a show, like, Mark Guggenheim, the showrunner of Arrow, and he's one of the executive producers of Legend of Tomorrow, he drove the Felicity character in Arrow straight into the ground, and they really made her just a weak character because she's not a character from the comics, so they didn't have anything to base it off of. And so they were like, oh, love interest for Oliver, shove it in their face, and that's what they did with that character. And it felt like with Kendra, it was almost the opposite. And what I mean by that is, with Kendra, you had all those great source material. You have multiple incarnations of Hawkgirl, whether it's from the Justice League animated cartoon, from the comics itself. And what do you do with her? You make her just another love interest for these characters. Like, obviously in the comics and in the show, she's drawn to Hawkman. That's her love interest. But don't make her just a love interest. Make her a badass. Make her a smart, intelligent person. Just stop reminding everyone that she's a freaking barista. We got it. We got that like 5 episodes in. We got that in the stupid scenes with her and Cisco and the Arrow and Flash crossover because she has to introduce herself. Oh, I'm Kendra. Also, I used to be a barista. Like that was. I'm sorry. I went a longer round on Kendra than I thought I would. It's gonna be sad to see the Hawkman and Hawkgirl go because I feel like without Vandal Savage there would be growth in those characters, but now that they're gone, they're probably gonna come in as like cameos or like one-off episodes or crossovers or whatever. And I think it's good just to kind of get them away from the time being and use them as auxiliary characters, not as like leading characters. But another big thing in this episode was ultimately Sarah finding out about the death of Laurel. And the death of Laurel was pretty much like the last straw for me and why I gave up on Arrow. So having to be reminded of that in tonight's episode, it was sad for me because I'm an emotional kind of guy. Like a lot of guys don't like to admit that, but in these kinds of shows, when there's characters that I'm attached to, especially with Laurel, who was a character I didn't like at first, I became so attached to. And the way they just shat on that character, the way they disrespected her as a character, they killed off Black Canary, goddammit. And seeing Sarah's reaction to this episode just made me emotional again. And it makes me miss Laurel that much more. There's a part of me that almost wishes they just at least gave Laurel a send-off to where she can maybe be on the Legends team with Sarah. Yeah, get her off of Arrow because obviously Mark Guggenheim, all he cares about is freaking Felicity. And you could have given her a good her and Sarah's relationship blossom more on Legend of Tomorrow. You could have done that, and they didn't. But Sarah's scenes in this episode, Katie Lotz's acting, it was so great in this episode. You really felt that when she was like threatening Rip, and just you really felt her raw emotion in this episode. But yeah, and also reminding me how great of a character Sarah Lance really has become. There's oddly enough, there are a lot of fans, like when she first came out on Arrow, a lot of fans didn't like her the way she was portrayed because they made her kind of like a female version of Oliver Queen. But in this show, she was able to be fleshed out more, but she became a lot more of a lighter character and essentially a emotionally deeper character. The only problem I had with her was when she had that stupid weird fling with that white nurse from the fucking 50s. But besides that, Sarah has been like my favorite character on this show besides Leonard Snart. And speaking of Leonard Snart, I want to talk about that another emotionally powerful scene between Snart and Mick when Mick goes back in. Obviously he goes back in time and he has a moment with Snart saying how much of a hero he thinks he is to him, and obviously Snart being Snart, he's like, I'm not much of a touchy-feely kind of guy. And that whole bit, and it's just, the showrunners of, like Greg Berlanti and all those guys have come out and said, Captain Cold will be back. He'll be a supporting character as he was in The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. Just he's not going to be a central character anymore. And I think the biggest reason for that being is because Dominic Purcell, or Purcell, whatever his last name is, and Wentworth Miller are returning for another season of Prison Break. So obviously that took up their time. So I understand that, but Leonard Snart was a character that really grew on me. So again, when that scene came between Mick and Snart, that was really emotionally powerful for me. So as a fan, again, they hit me right in the heart. I loved that scene. I loved the way that was handled. And also, another character who grew, Mick. Mick was just nothing but a hothead when we first met him, and they slowly developed him as a character, and they started doing the whole Kronos thing, and then once they brought him back into the team, there showed that there was layers to him, especially in the way his relationship was with Snart, and his relationship with Ray as well, because that's like they've been like butting heads almost all season, and now they're like, there's almost like a bit of a camaraderie between the two. Like Ray understands Mick in a way that Mick doesn't want to admit, and Mick does see him as a friend because, again, he just doesn't want to admit it because Mick's not normally an emotional guy. So there was that. Another cool thing about this episode was, Jackson Firestorm using, Martin Stein and Jax using their abilities to transform matter into other matter. When they did it with the Nazi guy's gun in 1944, that was cool because that's the aspect of the character in the comics that they haven't touched on in the show yet. So for them using it in this season finale, I actually thought it was a pretty cool nod to the comics. And seeing them finally use that ability and ultimately use that to turn the meteor underwater at the end of the episode, and then having Sarah be like, "Oh man, you got my shoes wet." I mean, it was a bit of a cheesy line, but I thought it was kind of funny. Sorry, I have the hiccups. But let's see what else. Also, finding out that the Thanagarians were in fact responsible for those meteors hitting Egypt, and obviously the source of the Hawkman, Hawkgirl, and Vandal Savage's power, much like it was in the comics. So I'm glad aspects of these shows stay true to the comics, but it's when they stray too much from the comics, that's when it's like, okay, like Oliver Queen on Arrow is nothing like Oliver Queen in the comics. Kendra, almost nothing like Hawkgirl in the actual comics. She's just, yeah. And that's where I feel like when these shows embrace their comic book history, that's when I think they succeed more, and their characters are more fun and more, not necessarily relatable, but just more enjoying. They're more enjoyable to watch. So I don't understand why they don't accept that their comic bookness sometimes, but yeah. Let's see what else. And the whole last 15 minutes of the show when the team was going after Vandal Savage in the 50s and the 70s and in 2021. That was honestly such a cool sequence. Honestly, that's like my favorite sequence of the entire show. When you have Sarah and Jax going after him in the 70s, you have Mick and Ray going after him in the 50s, and then you have the Hawks and Rip going after them in the 2021. And it was such a cool sequence of seeing Vandal Savage finally being stopped in the way that Kendra actually did something badass and was able to kill him. And that's where it was like, okay, like that in that moment, Kendra was cool to me. And just that whole sequence of them just finally killing Vandal Savage, even Rip getting justice for his family. Because ultimately the whole reason this season even happened was because Rip wanted to save his family. Ultimately he didn't, but he ended up stopping Savage, which was, and if they didn't, I'd be like, oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me. But they did it. Vandal Savage is gone. Yay! Finally. What else? Yeah, that was honestly one of my favorite episodes of the show so far. I might have to rewatch it just to see how it stands up next to the first couple of episodes and the Arrow episode, the Star City 2046 episode. But this show, honestly, it's had its rocky episodes. I honestly think, excuse me, I'm trying to readjust myself here. I think this show it should have been like a 13 episode season or even a 12 episode season, because it really, the meat of the show, its good episodes were good, but it was just subpar filler episodes that we really didn't need. Like the Night of the Hawks episode, we didn't need. I mean, it ties into tonight's episode, which I guess makes sense. But I wish they would have done it in a more interesting way. And even when they bring in like the Hawk creature thing in this episode, I'm like, oh, even when Ray's like, oh, come on, these things again, and that's how I was in my head. I'm like, ugh, I don't want to be reminded of that episode. And just, I feel like a lot of the episodes dealing with Vandal Savage, other than the first few, were just filler episodes. And that's where Vandal Savage as a villain wasn't the best villain for the series, or the way he was portrayed by Casper Crumb. I don't know if it was necessarily the acting or the writing. Just Vandal Savage never felt like Vandal Savage, from the comics. He never felt like that threat, like he was menacing all the time. I mean, he had some good episodes, like last episode he was pretty good. The first couple of episodes he was good. The Flash and Arrow crossover was good. Just the filler episodes, that's where it's and then the whole Russia storyline I really could have gone without. But yeah, overall this show, it was fun for the most part. Had its issues, yes. I expected more out of Kendra as Hawkgirl, but overall I was really satisfied with this show, and I'll be happy to come back watching it for second season. So I will. I'll definitely be reviewing this next year. And now that we have 4 DC shows on the CW, with Supergirl recently being moved to the CW, I'll be watching that and continuing to review that. So when fall rolls around, I'll obviously be reviewing Supergirl on Mondays, Flash on Tuesdays, still not reviewing Arrow on Wednesdays, and then Legend of Tomorrow on Thursdays, and also there's a new DC comic book show called Powerless coming out on NBC, which is basically about this insurance agency dealing with the damage of superhero battles and stuff. And it's set in the DC world, and they make references to Superman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman and stuff. And the trailer just came out today, so I might be reviewing that if I like the pilot enough. Just because I might want to review something since Arrow is not anymore. But it's been a lot easier not reviewing because making these videos can be a little time consuming and there's a lot more work going into it than you guys might think. But you know what? We'll see where things go. It's definitely going to be Supergirl, Flash, and Legend of Tomorrow for sure. So yeah, that's going to be it for this season of Legend of Tomorrow. What did you guys think of it? Did you guys like it like me? Did you guys have problems with it? What did you guys just think of it in general? Like, did you guys like it? Did you guys hate it? Did you guys just think it was okay? Let me know in this comment section below. Give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, that's going to be it. So until next season, guys, have a good one.